Shaitanir-Rajim, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. It's with the blessings, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that again we are gathering here this first Thursday of this month to continue our discussions on Maulana Rum and Iqbal and their teachings as they have come to us through their writings, basically in poetry. I am really excited today because we will give a brief introduction of Iqbal, and as many of you who live on Staten Island might know that I basically am an Iqbal student and I love Iqbal's poetry and his message. And why wouldn't anybody? Because I think he is one poet of basically subcontinent that really has given a significant message through his poetry to the point that we were able to get a nation and a country based on the concept that he presented, and people took it to heart and acted upon it. And the only nation, Pakistan, that is based on religion, was created, a large nation, mashallah, that has made a difference in South Asia. Iqbal is an amazing personality. Iqbal himself says that Iqbal bhi इकबाल से आगाह नहीं है, कुछ इसमें तमस्खुर नहीं वल्लाह नहीं है. Iqbal himself says that I really don't even recognize myself as to who I am. And I'm not just kidding. कुछ इसमें तमस्खुर नहीं. It's not funny. I'm not just giving you a kind of a light statement. He said, I quite frankly do not understand who I am. A person who says, तू राज़े कुन फ़क़ा है, अपनी आँखों पे आया हो जा, खुदी का राज़दां हो जा, खुदा का तर्जमा हो जा. How can a human being think in such a way where he says, you, तू राज़े कुन फ़क़ा है, you are the secret or the hidden message in kun fayakun, creation of universe, creation of everything. You are the hidden secret. You are the reason the whole creation is there. अपनी आँखों पे आया हो जा. Become manifest to your own eyes, to your own vision. See yourself, find yourself. Know who you are. खुदी का राज़दां हो जा. Get to know the secrets of yourself, nature of yourself. Share the secret with your inner self. खुदी का राज़दां. If there is a secret about your khudi, your being, you should be the one who knows that. And then खुदा का तर्जमा हो जा. Just imagine the words used. खुदा का तर्जमा. The one who actually translates the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not saying his words, just the whole entity that is the Creator. You are the manifestation of the characteristics of the Creator. In Christian theology, you read that the man is made in the image of God. Well, Iqbal is saying basically the same thing, but he says if you actually were to recognize yourself, then you will become a very divinely endowed being whereby many of your characteristics would be divine being. You will be able to show the rest of the creation what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the creator is. खुदी का राजदां हो जा, खुदा का तर्जुमा हो जा. So we're talking about him. Now this personality, this poet was born in Sialkot, which is now Pakistan. He lived 61 years. He studied in Lahore, then he went to Cambridge in England, where he did his masters. Then he went to Munich. 63.
63 आप दुआ किया करते थे कि मैं नबी करीम की उम्र से
ज़्यादा ना बढ़ूं. So Professor Saab is telling me that he lived to be 63. 77 to 38, so you can calculate it around that. He took his PhD in Munich, studied the European philosophy of Goethe and Nietzsche and others, was inspired by some of the writings, came home, got married, had some issues in settling, but straightened those things out, and then started to practice law. Poetry continued, initially in Persian. His first collection was Asrar Khudi, which is in Persian. And then several books in Persian, Ramuz-e Khudi, Payam-e Mashriq, Javeed Nama, Zabur-e Ajam, then Pas-e Baid Gard, Aqwam-e Sharq, and Musafir. Then in Urdu also he wrote Bang-e Dara, Bal-e Jibreel, Zarb-e Kaleem, and part of Armaghan-e Hijaz is also in Urdu. Part of it is in Persian. I took these 4 names of his Urdu books, Bang-e Dara, Bal-e Jibreel, Zarb-e Kaleem, and then Armaghan-e Hijaz. And I wrote a couplet. Professor Sahib, aapko to pata hai uska couplet ka. Bang-e Dara is the call for the marching, bell for the march call. Bal-e Jibreel is the wing of Gabriel. Zarb-e Kaleem is the Moses is strike, but they call it Elan Dore Hadar ke Khilaf Elan Jang, but that's probably just the mafhum of it. But Zarb is the when you hit something, and Kaleem is the name for Musa alayhi salam. Armaghan-e Hijaz is the present from Hijaz. Hijaz is the combined name of the Holy Land. Haramain Sharifin for us, Medina, Makkah Sharif, all of that part of Arabia is called Hijaz. So I'm going to share that couplet, which is my own. Sun ke Bang-e Dara kiya aagaz. I heard the marching bell and I started. Bal-e Jibreel se mili parwaz. फिर ज़ौक़ से फिर लगा ही ज़र्ब कलीम, तब मिला मुझको अरमुगाने हिजाज. So if you see how this kind of transgression is going, this progression is going, you realize, I use the word progression. It's amazing evolution of his thought also, but at least to me, if you read from Bang-e Dara to Bal-e Jibreel to Zarb-e Kaleem and then Armaghan-e Hijaz, you see the maturity in the thought process of Iqbal, whereby in the beginning with Bang-e Dara, he was able to write a little poems for the children, a little bit about India itself. But afterwards, he becomes totally spiritual and basically on the pattern of Rumi, not digressing from the message of Islam. Amazing collection of poems and and some lectures and other prose books, basically centered on the message of what humans are created for, what their potential is, and what is the limits. Now, somewhere as he was transforming into inspiring the Muslims across the globe, but specifically the oppressed Muslims of certain areas, including where he was spending his life, India. He centered on the message of developing your inner self, developing a character, personality, and trying to recognize the purpose of your creation. And the concept became khudi, the word you have heard many times. At the time when he used the word khudi in the common vernacular was not a positive thing. Khudi was more or less taken as pride. If somebody has ana, that would be translated basically as bada khud parast, egotistical individual. And he dared to use that word and persisted on using it because that is the correct meaning of your inner being. We talked
यहाँ डॉक्टर साहब खुद शनासी आप कह लें
खुद शनासी बिल्कुल exactly. So we talked about Rumi's message about Na and what she's talking about the spirit and Ruh, how it's separated from a higher status of living and came down and is now entrapped in the human body and all that. And that also was basically spiritual being, and we talked tangentially about Khudi there, but we didn't use the word Khudi because that only exclusively belongs to Iqbal. So we are going to now use it interchangeably between Rumi's teachings and Iqbal's, but I thought it appropriate that it should be recognized that Rumi has actually, Iqbal has actually brought the concept of Khudi and purified it to the point that it's now used as a positive attribute rather than ana or ego. For several years, the critics of his falsafa were basically very critical and negative about that. However, more and more they realized what he meant by Khudi. More it became apparent that that is the right translation of your true inner being. Now, to simplify this, human body and human existence basically has the physical body and the soul, like we discussed last time. Soul is your real identity. Your physical body is just temporarily with you. It's just carrying that soul. But your true identity is your inner being, which is soul, which is spiritual. Seat of it is in an entity called heart that is within you. And that heart may be a little bit different than the physical heart with 4 chambers that we all know about. So, with that message and being a disciple of Rumi, he carried the message of Rumi in simpler terms and believed in the philosophies, discussed the theories of fana fillah and baqa billah in such a way that people understood what actually is meant by a life hereafter and how it's essential or necessary to purify your soul. Stories told about a person who wanted to meet Joseph and he went to see him. Yusuf alayhi salam, we all know, was created in the best of shapes. He was a very handsome man. And this person wanted to go and meet him, and he went to him and he introduced himself, and Yusuf alayhi salam asked him, what did you bring for me? What gift did you bring for me? And he said, I was in a kind of a tough time as to what to bring for you. You have everything, worldly possessions you have. You have the status and you have the wealth and everything. What can ordinary man like me bring for you as a gift? And not thinking of anything else, I brought you a mirror. So you look yourself in the mirror, and that's the most beautiful thing that exists today in your being. Well, if you take the concept of khudi and purification of your soul, now what gift are you going to take to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you die? How many amals, how many hajj, how many prayers can you really perform that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs and will accept those because your pronunciation was perfect, your wuzu was correct, your niyyah was very good, you did not have any showing off or anything. Regardless of how much worship you do you think that is enough to actually even thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the millions of things that He has given us? If you imagine the human body, the eyes, the kidneys. You know, kidneys do analysis of so many chemicals simultaneously and cleanse your blood. Look at the labs. They can do one thing and the other thing, and then you keep changing the substrates and other things, add so that you can get the correct analysis. Here it is happening for us automatically. Look at the eyes. Not only that, it's taking a picture, it's making a video, it's recording it, it's keeping it in the back, sound, visual. And from 20 years ago, you just think about it, and it produces a picture in front of you, in the eyes of your mind, everything perfect. A person you saw 20 years ago, 30 years ago, somewhere, you think about that person and you see the location, see that person, you can even hear him talk, happening at the same time. How many gases and other things, that the lungs clear and whatever. So much we have been bestowed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can never thank Him enough. And when we go back to Him, we cannot just please Him by saying that we were very good and we did this and we did that. The best thing to take is a clean, cleansed heart in which the divine reflection automatically shows. All His attributes, more or less, He sees because you have a clean heart now. There is no dirt, no filth in it, nothing that really will impair a proper reflection of the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, this particular thing now, I'm thinking of Rumi's one verse. Professor Saab, you will love this. You know this, but anyway, I'm going to repeat it. Rahmat-e-Haq baha nami joyat. Rahmat-e-Haq, mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, baha, treasure, too much. Nami joyat is not searching, not looking for. God's mercy is not looking a lot from you, not looking for you to bring a whole lot to Him. Then what? Rahmat-e-Haq bahana mi joyat. Same letters, same words. Rahmat-e-Haq bahana mi joyat. Looking for an excuse to forgive you. Looking for an excuse, a reason. Just raise your hands and ask for it with sincerity. So, what can you do in this life to preserve that beauty, the inner beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in us? Don't let it be corrupted by this world, and do not be greedy of the things that are on this planet. Think of what you can take for the world hereafter. Now, obviously, we can lose track of time and go on several tangents when we talk about Iqbal, and we will inshallah be talking about Iqbal's message in many future sessions, God willing, if we get the get that tawfiq. With time, you never know when somebody's time comes and you're no longer in this world. But as long as we are here and we can have our faculties intact, we can talk about this and learn from Iqbal's message. Today I thought I just use one or two verses and then try to elaborate to establish a relationship between Rumi and Iqbal, and then at least see what Iqbal thought about himself. When he was on his deathbed, close to his last final few days, he wrote a verse, Sarod rafta baz ayat kinayat, Naseem az Hijaz ayat kinayat. Na ayat, I would say, and then but in the poetry you say nayat. Saramad rozgare-e fakire, digar danai raz ayat kinayat. He says, Sarode rafta baz ayat kinayat. The sound, the voice that has gone, whether it returns or not. Naseem ad Hijaz ayat kinayat. The breeze from Hijaz, from Haram Sharif, from Middle East. Whether it comes or not. Saramad rozgare-e fakir. He says, मैं फकीर, मेरी जिंदगी अब खत्म हो रही है. My life of this poor person is now ending. Here is the misra that I wanted us to ponder over. Digar danai raz ayat kinayat. Another person, knower of secrets, like I am, he's saying. Whether it'll come or not, I don't know. He knew about himself that he has, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, something that is from God, and he tried to share it as much as he could. But he says, another person with the same kind of qualities, same kind of reach, I don't know how long will it take for that person to come. I was listening to somebody's talk today, as a matter of fact, and the question was asked that Iqbal had such a stature and he wrote a lot and all that. Have we had anybody in the last 80 years since he passed away? Anybody that comes even close? And nobody comes to mind. So you can imagine what he was saying about himself was true. And as the time passes, we realize in Pakistan, where he actually spent his life, not many of us know Persian now, but even when he was there, at that time he was grappling with his personal life and family issues and other things around him, so he was as humanly as you could get. So people did not really think much of his message, which you can imagine. But as those people who had certain kind of negative feelings about him because of things that he may have been involved with or be commenting about and whatever else, which are human kind of properties or faculties and human nature. But as the time passes and people, the scholarly people are actually studying his message, we are realizing that he was somebody totally different. Iqbal himself says in another verse, Pasaz man, shere man goyan, dur ya band, mi goyan, jahane ra degargu kard, yak marde khud agahe. Pasaz man, shere man goyan, dur ya band, mi goyan, jahane ra degargu kard, yak marde khud agahe. खुद आगा, सेल्फ अवेयर, एक यक मर्दे, एक आदमी, जहाने रा दिगरगू कर, he changed the world, जहान को दिगरगू कर दिया,
ऊपर नीचे कर,
हाँ ऊपर नीचे कर दिया, साइड बाइड भी कर दिया. दिगरगू is actually to change it completely. So he says कि pasas man after me. Now he's still alive and he's writing this. Pasas man after I am gone. Shere man Goyan, they are reciting my verses. Dur Yaband, they are finding pearls and gems in it for me going. And then they are saying, look, this one man actually has changed our world. World of our thinking, world around us, and in the shape of Pakistan and the idea of Pakistan that he presented in the Allahabad session. So, yes, he had some clue about what he was and who he was. But people at the time really did not realize that he's from a different kind of a clan, different kind of a personality. Now here I can give you a story that Ali Bakhsh, his Khadim, told many years after Iqbal's death. People asked Ali Bakhsh many times, and he was reluctant in the beginning, but he gave the story that he says that Iqbal woke me up 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, one night, and says, "Ke mere mehman aaye hain, I have some guests." Anybody here that doesn't understand Urdu? Do you understand Urdu? Do you?
Yeah, everybody's understanding.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
All right,
everybody.
then everyone said, well, I'll go in Urdu also, because I think
We might have some audience.
we will, but I'll keep in English, but I'm saying occasionally when I'm going to a little bit. So Ali Bakhsh was called by Iqbal at that time, in the middle of the night, and he says, "Bahar se jaake lassi le aao." So Ali Bakhsh started to look for a katora to go for lassi, and Iqbal said, "I'll give you the katora." He was.
ये वाक्य बहुत सी किताबों में
बहुत किताबों में है, but many people may not know it. So Ali Bakhsh was startled at this time, who's visiting, and then where am I going to get the lassi at this time of the night? So he can't say no. He saw the room was aglow with some kind of a light, and it looked like the person that was sitting there as a guest was very important, but he dare not actually cross eyes. So he went to the street, and he started to wonder where is he going to find lassi at this time. So he says, when I turned around, I see a koka, that, what do you call it, translation in English? The street vendors, little stuff. And there is a man sitting there, preparing, making lassi, and he says, can you please give me a couple of glasses of lassi? He says, by all means. So he fills his katora with lassi, and Ali Bakhsh takes the money out to give him. And the man himself says that, no, you don't bother with the money. We have this going on back and forth with Iqbal. हमारा इकबाल के साथ हिसाब चलता है. आप ले जाएं लस्सी. Now he comes back. Iqbal serves his guests. They talk whatever they talk, and then Ali Bakhsh says that I saw this guest leave. When he left, he got out of the door, put his first foot on outside the door, and his second foot, by the time he moved, was at the end of the street in the corner. And then by the time Ali Bakhsh started to look, there was nobody. So he goes out of curiosity to see what had happened to the lassi wala. There was no koka and there was no lassi wala there. Now this story has been authenticated, written in the books and all that, and Ali Bakhsh was very reluctant to even divulge it, but he says that Iqbal told me, after I kept asking him again and again, one day Iqbal did tell me who these two people were, but he said that please do not say any of this to anybody until I am gone. After I am dead, it's up to you whether you want to tell this story or not. But don't divulge the secret. Turns out that the guest was Moinuddin Chishti and the person who was serving with Dada Ali Ajmeri and the lassi. So people seem to be dead. They are dead for years, and yet they are not really dead. They can be wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places them. They can do His work even after they have disappeared from this world. Now this is a philosophy which is difficult to grasp when you're young, when you have scientific mind, when you really believe in tangibles, anything you can touch you believe, otherwise you don't, and you don't have to believe it.
जैसे डॉक्टर साहब रूहानी फैज जिसको कहते
हाँ.
हैं, लेकिन लोग बिलीव नहीं करते.
I know. But what I'm saying is, even with tremendous Ruhani faiz and all that, in younger age, you may think you believe it, but you really don't get the concept until you're mature. A maturity of mind comes at a certain age. It said it comes at 40, but it can come anytime.
शेख सादी का स्टैंडर्ड रखा.
Sadika Beeb, and there are several other examples. At age 40, our Prophet ﷺ also announced his prophethood at that age. But that is amazing transformation of your own faculties, how things that look totally unbelievable become fairly easy to believe once your spiritual being is there. Once you have had experiences in your own life where things have happened to you, if your eyes are open, you may have things happening to you and you may not even realize that they are happening to you. Things may be going in a way that you wanted, you prayed, it happened, but you had other explanations for those things and you never realized that this was specially done for you, but it happens. Now, this is one of many instances that happened in Iqbal's life. There are several things that you read and it doesn't make any kind of an impact on you. But there is one more story that I want to share, and that is when somebody traveled from Srinagar to come and meet Sheikh Muhammad Iqbal. And he met him, and then he kind of feasted his eyes. He wanted to actually physically see him. He had heard his name. And then he mentioned that in the company, in the assembly of Prophet in Hijaz, that he had a special, Iqbal had a special place where he was to sit all the time.
दरबारे नबवी में.
Darbare Nabwi mein. And this man had heard that he's alive and there, and he wanted to come and physically meet him. So things like that are not necessarily for everybody, and one doesn't really have to know or believe them because this doesn't pertain to everyone. However, knowing that all this is possible with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has special chosen people, one should be mindful that you should not reject it out of hand, that this cannot happen, it doesn't happen, it's a lie or whatever. Because in so doing, you may be actually hurting your own spiritual growth. Your own faith system, belief system in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may not be as strong because, like they say, that prayer if you are actually seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but if you can't have the faith in you that He is seeing you. So to have that faith that He is seeing you, you require a real, sincere effort and a strong and seeing eye and seeing heart. Iqbal says that Umrha dar kaba butkhana min alad hayat taze bazme ishq yak danai raz ayat baru. He says the life, human society, when he says about life, he doesn't talk about one person's life. He's talking about right now. We have a life in Pakistan where there is no Iqbal. If Iqbal was there, or 800 years ago, if Rumi was there and you were there, that would be a life. So similarly, he says, Umrha, for ages, dar Kaaba Butkhana, in world and in the mosques, in the religious sites and in the worldly sites. You look in both worlds, and the Min Alad Hayat, the life keeps crying, looking for something. Ta-ze bazme ishq, yak danai raz ayat baru. Then and only then, one knower of the secrets comes out of this assembly of love, this world that we are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is love. He wanted to spread His love. He created this world out of His love. And we are all the assembly of love. All we have to do is recognize that through love, we can understand ourselves. be very accommodating to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Love is not only to other human beings, but to all his creations. They talk about Musa. He was herding the sheep, and one of the sheep just disappeared and just started to run and went way astray. And he kept after it. He knew that it had gone that side, and he was with others also. By the time he tried to locate it and find it, he was tired, his clothes were shattered here and there. He was just gasping in breath, and he finally caught the sheep, and he's talking to the sheep. And he says, do you realize how much you must be tired and how much you made me tired? Now, it was not necessary. Why did you have to go this way and this? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening and watching, and he says, now Musa is ready for my message. Now I can give him the prophethood. And that's when he started to see the fire in Kohetur. And he goes there and he's now ready. The iron is ready for the hand of the mason. Loha ab jo hai, us chot ke liye taiyar. So, to just keep things simple, and I gave a brief introduction of Iqbal, gave you some idea that he was visibly a human being like me and you, but if you read his poetry and some of his poems, one more I'm thinking, he says, मेरे गुलू में है एक नगमा, जिब्राइल आशो, संभाल कर जिसे रखा है लामकां के लिए. That's the last verse of his famous nazm, न तू ज़मीं के लिए है, ना आसमां के लिए, जहाँ है तेरे लिए, तू नहीं जहाँ के लिए. You're not for the sky and you're not for this earth. This whole thing, sky and all that, is for you. You are not for them. रहेगा रावियो नीलो फरात में कब तक तेरा सफीना के है बहरे बेकरां के लिए. Your little boat, for how long will you keep it in the Dajla and Rawat and Ravi and all that? This one belongs into an open ocean. Come and meet with the entire, body of knowledge and body of, being. And he at the end says, "Mere gulu mein hai ek nagma." I have a song here deep in my throat. Jibrail Ashok. If Gabriel heard it, he would feel sorry for himself because he does not have that privilege. I can go directly and talk. Jibril gets it from there, gives it to me, and he doesn't get anything for himself. But this one doesn't even need Gabriel. It's mediation. संभाल कर जिसे रखा है लामकां के लिए, I'm saving it. I will talk to him face to face when I get there. Look at the audacity and the self-confidence of his being. He knew from within himself, and many times he had dealings with Rumi, which had passed on 600 years prior to him. And Rumi, and I did not get to that part because I really don't want to overtake the time. I don't know, we have... You have time yet?
No.
Yeah.
What time do we finish?
We are supposed to have 45 minutes total, but...
We begin, I think, at 7:45. So we have...
So we are going to open it?
We can open for the discussion, but let me just at least say a little bit about his relationship to Rumi, because he says that Pir Rumi khak ra aksir kar. Pir Rumi khak ra aksir kar az ghubaram jalwa ha tamir kar. There are many verses that I had selected, but basically the theme is the same. He says, I was nothing. I was a ghubar. I was a simple little bit of dust. But Pir Rumi made me aksir. Aksir is a remedy of so many maladies. If you have a zahr and you have a tiryak, specific for zahr. But aksir is a remedy for so many things, just like Rumi had said that Shad Bash hai, ish khush saudaima, at tabibe jumla illat haima. Oh, you physician of all my ills, oh, the compassion, the love. Similarly, Iqbal says, the Pir Rumi khak ra aksir kard az gubaram jalwa ha tamir kard. He took my dust, took me from nothing, and he made me something worth seeing. He created so many things out of my dust, and I became somebody that I can now at least say that I have contributed to humanity in some way or the other. Jalwaha, az gubaram, jalwaha. And when he talks about Pir Rumi, he says, Pir Rumi murshade roshan zamir, karwane ishq masti ra amir. He is the leader of the caravan of ishq and masti. That's what Pir Rumi is. And Pir Rumi has given Iqbal so much, just like Pir Rumi received from Tabriz. It seems that Tabriz physically met him, and he gave that to Rumi right there. Now Iqbal, 600 years later, was able to receive from Rumi unimaginable. He, at every point, in the beginning of Asrar Khudi writes about it, and the beginning of so many books, he first gives credit to Rumi, that I was nothing, and Rumi made me who I am. He कहता है सोबते पीर रूम से मुझ पे हुआ ये राज फाश लाख हकीम सर बजेब एक कलीम सर बकफ. So many other verses where he credits Rumi, and if you read his poetry, that's Persian poetry, almost looks like he has taken several verses of Rumi and put those messages in his own words. Now this little thing that I read, Pir Rumi-O Murid Hindi, this was published at a special anniversary for Rumi, and there they took several writers wrote how Rumi and Iqbal basically are dwelling on the same theme and same message. Rumi, if you read him, and we will inshallah be, taking his verses one by one from now on, instead of talking on larger subjects, we will take and dissect one or two verses from him, one or two from Iqbal, and then elaborate on those. But his Rumi's verses use actual words of hadith and actual words, Arabic words of Quran. Iqbal has taken that precaution of not using the Quranic words directly that much, although he has used briefly, la takhaf and this and that, but not in any larger verses. But Rumi has. And Iqbal and Rumi basically make this claim that if there is anything contradictory to Quran and Hadith in our verses, in our kalam, Iqbal specifically says that if there is any contradiction in anything other than Quran and Hadith, then oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, deprive me of being able to kiss the feet of the Prophet at the Day of Judgment. He punishes himself by saying that I am so confident that whatever I have said is consistent with the message of Quran and Hadith. And he obviously has stood the test of time. People have been reading, analyzing it, and they really find not a single verse after the original things that are about nationality and children and all that. Rest of it is all filled with messages. If you leave out Bangedara, rest of it is all filled with messages that are very, very helpful to all of us. I hope that we will have a cadre of people, besides myself and Professor Khalda Zahoor and others, that will be taking turns and probably will have frequent sessions in which we will be able to go over. If you just take Iqbal alone and take one nazm at a time, one lifetime is not enough. And if you take Rumi, just out of 6 volumes, you select maybe 10 verses from each volume, you will have next 30 years all charted out.
डॉक्टर साहब बाज़ रूमी की हकायात में बाज़ दफ़ा कुछ फारसी का भी
नहीं वो that is नहीं, that is something that we are careful in discussing in today's times, but quite frankly, there is a hikmat in that. If you read those actual Persian things, although the stories are not necessarily the story that we'll pick to tell everybody, but for a mature mind, it's not really as obscene or as negative as one would imagine. But can you believe that? That may be the element that attracts all the Western world. And that may be the reason he's so popular in the Western world now. Translations upon translation. He doesn't look like a typical Muslim. I'm talking about Rumi now. He does not look like somebody who's flashing a Islamic banner around his neck and talking about how everybody else will burn in hell except Muslims. He does not say that. He's very careful in that. And when he tells the story about the maid and some king falling in love with this girl and the mistress and this and that, there is symbolism.
Jismani Izhar ki badi tafseer.
I know he has done that, but that may have been the tradition at the time in the poetry, who knows. However, that is something that people probably find very relevant at the time. So I think I should stop here for questions and answers, because most of the time, most of the time, most you learn is through the answers and questions. Yes, go ahead.
It's over.
Please.
Several points, Dr. Savan, and I'll take a few minutes to put the thoughts together that we've been discussing.
Okay, in the meantime, anybody else can ask. Yeah, go ahead.
You talked about Iqbal today and his
Yes.
philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
You just mentioned that historical distance between Rumi and Iqbal is 600 years.
Yeah,
They were not contemporary.
they're not.
Yet Iqbal's philosophy and poetry is heavily influenced by the poetry and philosophy of Rumi.
No question about
What
it.
is the common thread between the two? The common thread, as I understand, in the last three sessions that we had, is that each philosopher and poet, Rumi and Iqbal, are trying to have a human being, mankind, recognize his attributes, recognize himself, try to figure out who he is, that he's greater than what he looks like. He's bigger than what he looks like. Let me bring another angle to this thought that you have discussed. The relationship between Rumi and Iqbal, 600 years apart. Let's talk about Iqbal's contemporary. Iqbal was in Germany. Look at the period Iqbal was, 1877 to 1938. Friedrich Engels, famous German philosopher who co-authored Manifesto, Communist Manifesto with Karl Marx. Karl Marx was 1818 to 1883. Engels 1820 to 1895. Iqbal 1877 to 1938. They're in Germany. Iqbal was influenced by the thought of Engels. What was his thought? He was a communist philosopher. As a matter of fact, when I was studying political science, I'm by training a political scientist. People talk about Karl Marx, but actually the philosophy of Marx was influenced by Engels. What did Engels say? He said, human being, mankind, should recognize his attributes. The attributes
His
of
potential.
God
Mm-hmm.
that human being gives to God, like compassionate, merciful. That is, if you, as a human being, reach that stage, you are merciful, you are kind. Therefore, you will reach a stage, now I'm talking about Engels and Karl Marx, that when you reach that stage, you will not need God. there is no God but you. If you reach that height of spirituality and recognition of who your attributes, you just talked about that Iqbal said attributes of human beings are attribute of God, because you have to recognize that.
They become one.
They become one.
Exactly.
आपने भी कहा
तर्जुमान।
खुदी का राज़दां हो जा, खुदा का तर्जुमा हो जा. Then if you recognize yourself, oh man, that you can reach that height, that when you speak, God will be speaking through you.
उंगलियां।
खुदा का तर्जुमा हो जा. That is the spirituality. That is the common thread. Where Engels and Marx and Iqbal separate is that Iqbal is taking us that when you reach that stage, you become so spiritual that you are closer to God. His contemporary philosophers in Germany at that time, the three of us were at the same, they are contemporary. Engels said, when you reach that point, you recognize that there is no God but you.
Exactly. Now,
So I've given you an academic background of this thought, because when I was
Let me-
Germany was a philosopher's environment, right?
Environment at the time. Let
जवाब
me-
ये भी इकबाल का है, खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे
बता
बताते
तेरी
ही
रज़ा
रज़ा
क्या है?
है? Because you can reach that height. So the commonality is, and you just started when you began your lecture, that we are into symbolism of religion, that we are praying, we are fasting, although that is important, but in order to reach that height, you have to go beyond that. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that Iqbal was heavily influenced, because he was contemporary of Karl Marx, contemporary of Friedrich Engels, and they were all there together.
But that is
look at the,
also demonstrated in his poetry
it is
of
demonstrated.
social, as a social democrat, because he talks about the poor,
Yes.
poor
Yes,
and
that
the,
comes.
yeah.
Iqbal's PhD thesis, which somebody should go and read it, the metaphysics of Persia, the philosophy, is itself the beginning of Iqbal's spirituality when he did his PhD thesis.
This is where our lecture should have ended 20 years from today. Where you took it right now. We are being fairly careful in going there. But since you brought it up, around that time
I was
also,
listening that
the
night.
theories about ये है ना कि रहेगा रावियो
Yeah.
वगैरह वगैरह अफराद में कब तक तेरा सफीना के है बहरे बेकरां के लिए. Now, Rumi and Iqbal differed in one little thing, and that was there was one philosophy of fana fillah, that you become so much merged into
Right.
the ocean that you no longer exist,
Mhm.
and it's
Exactly.
all ocean.
You
And
no
the other,
longer exist.
the other theory is baqa billah, that you stay as a drop also. Your own identity is still maintained, and you are living with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala too. You are in the ocean, but you as a drop are still maintaining your own identity. Now remember, we just heard the story about these two gentlemen that were there in Iqbal's place, one inside, one outside. This doesn't look like fanafillah, this looks like baqa billah. These people never die. There's a story of another man who basically, when he passed on, he had told his disciples that for my janazah, get somebody who has never missed his tahajjud prayer, and he has never missed his sunnah of the asr prayer, and never had a qada of this. And when he died, and he's up there, the body's up in front, all the people are lined up, the ulama and this and that from all over the place they came. Nobody's stepping up, because nobody can say that they have fulfilled all the requirements. Then somebody comes, you know the story.
Yeah.
Then somebody comes and leads the prayer. It was hooded so nobody could see who it is. And he leads the prayer and then again disappears. It was the same man that was lying dead. But when he disappeared, they buried him and they completed the rituals. But those are the things that are way, way beyond our present discourse. So there is a danger. This is why whenever we talk about attributes of humans, that it becomes, that you become so close to God that you walk with the feet of that He walks with, that you touch the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Quran also says, oh Prophet, when you threw the stones, it was not you, but it was God who threw the stones. So all of that comes to a point where people start to wonder whether we are doing shirk. We are calling ourselves God, and we are far from it. We are simply going through the philosophy, as we know, exists in Islam, and you are absolutely correct. When Iqbal saw all of that, he actually was feeling so sorry for them, that they are so right, they have everything right, and yet at the end, they are not blessed with the message of Islam.
But they were Guru Nanak.
They were not blessed with the message
Yeah, like
in
Guru
their heart.
Nanak was never blessed. You know, Guru Nanak had a lot of philosophy, never blessed toward the Islam, right?
Yeah, he was very close to it, and their Sikhism also is doing most of the things that we do. Any other questions?
ये जो आपने कहा था कि रूहें जिस्म से मिला दी जाती हैं, ये आपने आइडिया कहाँ से लिया है?
क्या?
रूह जो है वो जिस्म से मिला दी जाती है, आदमी आप कुछ बात कर रहे थे ये जब इकबाल के इंट्रोडक्शन कर रहे थे।
नहीं, वो रूमी की बात पिछली मैंने तज़किरा किया था कि वो पिछले लेक्चर में था ये कि all the spirits are up in a divine kind of realm, and when people are born, they are placed into this body.
Right, but the Quran denies all these things because अगर आप सूरह बनी इसराइल की आखिरी आयत में देखेंगे, आयत नंबर 80 शायद आयत नंबर 67 है, यसलूना का रूह कुल रूह में नंबर रब्बी वमाती तुम मिनल इल्मी इल्ला क़लीला। आयत तुमसे रूह के बारे में पूछते हैं, कह दो इनसे कि तुम्हें बहुत कम इल्म दिया गया है, तुम नहीं जानते। लेकिन सारा कुरान अगर आप पढ़ लें तो उसमें कहीं भी ये रूमी का कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ डिवाइन नहीं मिलता। तो अगर आप देखें ना, यू वांट टू नो द ट्रूथ, यू हैव टू गेट इट फ्रॉम द ट्रूथ। आप अगर कुरान को सारे को स्टडी करेंगे तो आप मुझे नहीं पता कि फिर आप रूमी को कहाँ रखेंगे, किस पोजीशन पे।
Rumi is 100% with the Quranic message. There is no contradiction in Rumi's message anywhere, and this is that you're talking about spirit. Spirit, we basically have enough information to know that it's something supernatural that is not from this world. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us also. Don't crave into it, don't go delve into it too much. Remember, humans have a certain capacity. We may imagine things, but even that imagination is limited. Our total intellect is limited. We can never have 1/1,000,000th of the knowledge that's knowledge out there. So for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us that this is something that I have given you very little knowledge about. I see no contradiction there at all.
डॉक्टर साहब एक है ना जो 30वें पारे की आयत है जिसमें कि रूहें जिस्मों से मिला दी जाएंगी।
वो तो क़यामत के दिन आएगा।
Well, they'll come back to the, but there is absolutely no
क़यामत के दिन
no
लोग
question.
भी जिंदा क़यामत के दिन ही करेंगे, मरने के बाद कोई जिंदा नहीं हो सकता।
The discussion here is not compare Quran or Islam with Rumi or Iqbal per se. What we started this halqa is to take Rumi, to take Iqbal, and look at their philosophy and poetry and try to understand that, see what were they
And
trying
use
to
it
do.
in our lives
Yes.
to advance our spiritual growth.
Balancing and bringing Quran, the Kareem, and other things is not what.
No, but I think
we
quite
can
frankly,
reach
it's
that.
consistent.
No, in terms
but
of
we are discussing.
questioning us
Yes.
without really reading Rumi. I mean, I
Yes.
have not even read even 10 verses of
But
it.
but
although we
Rumi
have-
is translated
Rumi
now
changed when he met
English.
Shah Shams Tabriz. When he met the Shams Tabriz,
Yes.
then he changed his whole idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
when he
turning
joined
point.
his whole bookstore.
Any
library,
Professor साहब आप
I
कुछ कहना
studied
चाहेंगे?
Rumi well.
आप इकबाल का मशहूर शेर के हाथ अल्लाह
हाथ है अल्लाह का बंदा मोमिन का हाथ
गालिब
कार
व
कुशा
काराफरीन,
कार
कुशा,
कार कुशा कार साज.
Right.
But you see, again, if we delve into that will happen. So we have to be careful.
How close you become.
हाथ है अल्लाह का बंदा मोमिन का हाथ. Now he's basically saying the same thing that Quran has taught us, Hadith has taught us, but he's saying it with a careful way. Kar kusha kar, and at the end he says kar saas, which means he actually gets the things done for you. But we will get there. We are at a very basic lessons of spirituality. All I ask us is to open our hearts, receive this message. This is not my saying, this is not somebody's made up stories. These are authentic verses of real classic poets who have actually really lived lives like that themselves. And all this time, over the centuries for Rumi and for over 80 years now for Iqbal, really gives us authenticity. That there is weight to these. Yes. आप कुछ जरूर कहें थोड़ा सा इस हवाले से.
नहीं आपने बड़ी अच्छी वजाहत कर दी.
I kept it very superficial deliberately so that we do not have any doubts in our mind as to what Iqbal and Rumi have been trying to achieve. Now there are verses in here that we will inshallah learn in future. We'll delve into this. You would imagine that you have been talking all your life and listening to these things and you did not realize what it meant.
Exactly.
And believe you me, this is the purpose of poetry. Otherwise they could have said this in simple verse and if the same thing was in prose, it will have a different impact. This opens up to you to the capacity that you have. More capacity you have, more you will take home.
इसमें डॉक्टर साहब हम ये कह सकते हैं कि शेर की तफहीम में कारी को अपना हिस्सा डालना चाहिए.
Exactly. वो डालता है वैसे उसको पता हो या ना हो.
हाँ. ये बकदरे ज़र्फ है या बकदरे ज़हानत है.
Exactly. Yeah.
When is the next session, Doctor?
First Thursday of next month, but I think we should do it more frequently. I mean, I prepare it, then I forget, then I have to prepare it. So, but I think we are keeping it light and short right now because everybody wants to, to feel less burden.
This time you were in England, therefore we didn't have any lesson. So what is will you post the lesson for next session?
The impact of giving a prepared stuff, do you think it takes anything away? Do you think it adds anything? I think topics should be given rather
Topic
than...
should be given.
Topic.
So
This
that
is why
we
I
can
gave those
listen,
few
yeah.
lines that we'll
Give
talk
us
about
the
Iqbal
topic.
and Rumi's relationship with each other.
Just the
Yeah.
topic.
Well, let's now decide for the next, if you want, we can talk about Dil, Maqam-e-Dil.
मकाम-ए-दिल कहते
And as to what is Dil,
Okay.
okay, and then how they have used it, or Dil or Ishq or Ilm, whatever. I mean, these are larger topics.
Yeah.
How do you compare knowledge with Ishq, love and knowledge? We can probably use 2 or 3 lectures on this because I think it would be difficult to encompass everything. So for the next 2 or 3 lectures, it will be
Okay.
जहाँ वो है, जहाँ दिल है, वहाँ वो है, जहाँ वो है वहाँ सब कुछ, मगर पहले मकाम दिल समझने की जरूरत है.
Mashallah.
This is beautiful ghazal from one of the Indian poets, but I love this particular verse. जहाँ वो हैं वहाँ दिल है, जहाँ दिल है वहाँ वो हैं, और जहाँ वो हैं वहाँ सब कुछ, मगर पहले मकाम दिल समझने की. So what is the nature of heart that we have been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Once we understand that, then we will come on the first step toward the journey that takes us back to our origin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in wisdom and comprehension so that we can get the message clearly, succinctly within ourselves and live by it for the rest of our life.
Thank you. Thank you very much.